All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Powell, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm really excited for today's conversation because Appendage was one of my favorite movies I've seen this year. I'm a huge horror guy, and I love beyond horror. I love really weird horror. So obviously, this movie checks the box. So before we dive into the movie, though, I do want to get to know you a little bit. Take me back to the first time that you ever watched a movie, and there was something inside of you that clicked and said, "I want to do this."
All right, there's two. The first Brendan Fraser Mummy movie. Of all of the things I think any film person could say, maybe that's not like the most like cool answer. But I was I remember watching that as a kid and being like, oh man, how did they make the mummy happen? Like what was the effects process? I was way more interested in like how the hell they got the thing to move and talk and what the like prosthetics were than I was, like being scared of it because I was however young I was at the time.
Right.
And then the second one was the first Matrix movie. Just all of it just made me be like, I gotta be a part of that somehow.
The first Mummy movie was a huge piece for me. They got me interested in filmmaking. And it's funny because the last guest I had on talked about Stephen Sommers too. So you talked about like The Mummy. We talked about like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, like that weird late 90s, early 2000s kind of like trying to revisit these universal horror monsters. But I remember watching the original Mummy bonus features like as much as the movie. So I'd watch like the artists like, we're taking the texture of this beef jerky and we're adding it to the Mummy to give him texture, and like here's how we do all this. And it was super fascinating, and it's one of the things I miss now going to streaming is like some of those rich bonus features and like really cool in-depth documentaries that were like little micro film schools just don't exist anymore. It's kind of a big loss. Watching that and being fascinated, was it something that turned quickly into a hobby? Was it something that in your young mind you thought this is a career that I could actually do? Or like was it something that kind of was just, this is really interesting and I also need to pursue becoming a doctor?
No, I didn't go full doctor. It was definitely something that developed as a hobby. I mean, made, movies with friends. I would steal my parents' camera on vacations and film my own stuff instead of what they were trying to use it for. But no, I jumped around a little bit. I was into music for a long time. I was in a couple bands. Both of them came with me to college, and I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. And actually, before that, I was really into video game design, and so I was learning coding and how to 3D model and 3D paint things, and then I jumped back into music and kept going back and forth. And both bands broke up while I was in film school. Actually, I got into film school at USC, and I was considering switching to the music program. And then, literally at the same time, both of them just like exploded. And it was the same semester that the film classes were actually starting. Because the first 2 years at USC, you basically just do gen ed. And so I was like, yeah, what am I doing here? I'm going to play music. This is going to be great. And so, no, everything kind of serendipitously blew up and led me right to this career.
Retroactively, do you feel like that's the best thing that could have happened? Or do you ever go, what if they had stuck together and we'd kept going? Like how do you feel about it now looking back?
No, I think this was definitely the right route. I mean, I was still so into making weird shorts and things with my friends, even while I was playing music, that it was always a part of my life, even when I was focused on something else. So this was the right route.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you had an interest, obviously, in like visual effects and just visuals in general, like whether video game design, whether, watching effects breakdown of the Mummy and wondering how they did that. Was there any part of you that was like curious about the VFX side, or was it just, it's cinematography, I think, is the route to go. And if it was the latter, like what were some of the biggest inspirations you started watching a lot to kind of like, I guess, glean from their work and their filmographies?
No, I definitely had a minute where I got really into special effects makeup and also just green screen visual effects in general. And so my application to Chapman was actually like a zombie film. I did all the zombie makeup, and I kept going with that. My two major films at USC were both grindhouse horror movies, and so I was doing blood and applications, on all that. Um, but no, I think I just always have loved operating a camera.
Yeah.
It was definitely that. And there's a moment when you get to film school and you're the kid from your high school that like maybe there were three
Hmm.
others who like movies, but everyone shows up and you're in a room with 300 people who are all like, we're all gonna be directors. And you're like,
Right.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's how it works. And
Yeah.
so um I I just, I picked up a camera and I started to shoot for a lot of those people that I was meeting, and I realized that this was something
Yeah.
I could really do, and I was I think pretty good at the time, and I was able to kind of pick up and then start working with a lot of people on instead of you know going lone wolf. I will be an auteur director. It just didn't seem like the right path for me. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
I read the book, What They Don't Teach You in Film School, and it opens with the story of like a classroom of like, I think it was 300 students. And it's like, how many of you want to be a director? And like all 300 raise their hands. And then they say, okay, all of you put your hands down except for one. And the teacher goes like, and that's if you're lucky, and it was
yeah,
kind of like this big reality, wake up call. Looking back, obviously film school is full of hopefuls that, are going there to launch themselves into the industry. For some, it works really well. For some, it just becomes a very expensive experience, and then they don't get any benefit out of it. For you now looking back, do you think film school is a necessity for people who are trying to get into the film industry? And would you do it again if you were going back in time?
I would. I've thought about this. Like, could I have taken the tuition money, just bought like an early model Alexa and just started shooting?
Right.
Maybe, but for earlier on, I'm better now, but earlier on I was not a very social person. I was not good at meeting people and not
Mm.
good at networking. And so having to go somewhere where they're like network, they like
Yeah.
push you into a room
Right.
with students and they're like, these people will work with you forever. Stay friends with them. Like that was what was helpful for me. I learned way more. Sorry, BOC on set than I did like in terms of camera operation and lighting. I just,
Right.
when you're forced to do it practically and like if you don't do it well, you're not going to get another job. You just start to pick things up really, quickly. um, but no, going there. I mean, Anna, who directed Appendage. I met at USC. We
Oh,
co-DP'd a thesis. Yeah, we co-DP'd a thesis together before she started directing more. Michelle Patterson, our PD, was also at USC. Nick Chuba, our composer on Appendage, was in a band that my band used to play with, and so a lot of the Appendage cast and crew. Oh, and then some of our EPs. Jenna Cavell was also a USC. Like it's
wow.
just
It's an
Appendage is a
alumni
very
project. Yeah.
stacked alumni project. Yeah. I know I'm missing one person who also went, and I'm sorry to whoever that is. But it was helpful for that alone. One of my closest friends, who I've made two movies with now. He was a screenwriter there. I'm producing a script for another friend of mine who's a screenwriter there. We were all on the same floor freshman year. Our editor was also on our same floor freshman year. It's wild how many people stuck together leaving there. So I can't say it wasn't worth it. Maybe it's
Yeah.
not what I thought I was going to get out of it,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it's what I needed to get out of it.
Yeah.
So
That's incredible. I didn't realize what a connection there was between everybody on this
yeah,
project. Um, Take me into that. I know we could spend a lot of time on the post film school to going into the feature realm, but I'm curious stepping into this project specifically because I'm fascinated by. I mean, I'm fascinated by this Huluween thing that Hulu's been doing, and Hulu's actually put out a lot of really cool just one-off horror projects over the last couple years,
No
and
One Will
like
Save You recently. No One Will Save You is so
I've
fun.
got to see that. I've heard it's really good. I really like the one they did. I forget what they called them. They didn't call them Halloween. There was like a different series of shorts they did with Blumhouse, but there was one called I'm Just Fucking With You, and like I
Oh, I did see that.
really love that movie. There's been a couple. It's just like these really cool, interesting, like almost Tales from the Crypt-esque shorts, and then or not shorts, features. And yeah, Appendage is a super cool project. Like, how did you get involved with it? And did you realize how many people you knew were connected to it stepping into the project?
Yeah. So on top of all those crazy connections, our producer and editor Alex Familian, I actually went to high school with him,
Oh
and we
wow.
took film classes at high school together. And so after that, I actually connected with Anna, and it just it was one of those things where we kind of knew going in because we did the short together, and so this crew has been working. Anna, Alex, and I have done 3 or 4 since we graduated together in different capacities. Sometimes Alex is directing, sometimes Anna's directing. Um, and Michelle has done a lot of PD for Anna since then. Michelle PD'd a thesis that I gaffed in college as well. So it was just sort of this crew that's moved up together since then. And so when we got to it, it was really nice to finally do a long form project together.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you were in it from ground up?
Yeah, I did the short with Anna. And there are definitely stylistic differences between the two, but it was it was even fun on the short,
Right. Well, I
tighter resources. But
yeah,
yeah.
right. Yeah, definitely. Um, well, I'm curious, like coming into this, because it's such a, I feel bad for whoever had to cut the trailer for the movie because it's not, it's like I watched the trailer and then watched the movie and was like, I love the movie. I love the trailer. I don't know how you properly represent the movie in its entirety with the trailer because it's very bizarre. It is very Tales
Yeah.
from the Crypt. I kept going back to that in my mind. I was like, this is like a top tier Tales from the Crypt episode. For the approach of it, like what were some of the inspirations, like as you're putting together lookbooks for this and like starting to decide what the look of it is? Because there's parts that feel very Evil Dead. There's parts that feel very like, Rosemary's Baby-esque. There's parts, there's parts that feel very goofy and then parts that are decidedly not goofy. Like, how did you start laying out like this is the visual style of this film?
Yeah, I mean, we jumped around with the references just because of that reason. It was really, how do you nail down one movie that represents the look of this one? And so we jumped all over the place. I mean, we had let's see, Seven, Don't Breathe, Black
Mm,
Swan, Fight Club. I'm a big fan of the Evil Dead 2013 film.
same here. Yeah.
Aaron Morton, who shot that's like one of my favorite, modern DPs. He did it. No One Will Save You. That's why I was like, I had to see
Mm,
it. But so we had all those, and then on top of that, we had The Fly, and it was the just a crazy spread of films. And I can't say that this movie
huh.
looks like any of them. And then on top of that, there was this sort of weird we've been calling it like Guillermo del Toro, almost like storybook or fairy tale style to some of the scenes. There's
Mm,
like this sort of magical realism of like the first scene she pricks her finger on the needle, or the ending sequence in the attic where it has this like opening and closing a storybook kind of vibe to it,
right.
which I think came about because between the practical effects and sort of the ridiculous but still important message of it all. That's kind of a fairy tale thing. It's like, how can we tell someone a story that makes them change their lives with like the most fantastical elements possible? And
Yeah.
so I think it kind of was sort of born there. But we look to a lot of early Fincher just for
Hmm.
how grounded that stuff was. Like a lot, like Seven, very realistically lit movie in a lot of ways.
Right.
Like you can understand where all the lights are coming from. You know what
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean? Like there's nothing ridiculous and out of place happening in it. And we knew we wanted that because of how much between the drama and the comedy, we didn't want to take away too much from people's attention to what was actually going on with Hannah. And
Right.
so tried to keep it grounded, but yeah, like you said, it's a really ridiculous batshit movie. And so we did want to get to lean into that. We developed a kind of like somewhere between a color story and color rules, where based on all of our movies, we kind of slimmed it down to 3 tones we thought fit the film. And so there was this gold orange light that we used for when Hannah was mostly up in her own brain, manic, anxious, and it was all her own fault. We had then this green tone that was when the appendage was sort of influencing her.
Hmm.
And then blue became a color that worked its way into the PD, and the color correction and the lighting passes were like when it was either a comfort zone or her friends, blue becomes a more prevalent color.
Hmm.
And so you kind of go back and track it, you'll see, the bar scene all blue. It's the only
Yeah.
time she's alone with Esther in the whole movie, before shit goes wrong. And then the ending of the movie, she's in blue. We white balanced upstairs, so the attic, the like daylight skipping off the floorboards was colder, and so it actually tied into the
Hmm.
blue friendship vibes a little, things like that, where we tried to get it in when we could.
Yeah.
Never forced it where it felt weird, like we didn't have a neon blue light outside in the middle of the day when she's talking to a friend, but just little ways to try and clue people into what was going on with Hannah as things went. And those were all tones the gold from Seven has some of the best interior warm yellow golds you can find. But you also looked at things like Pan's Labyrinth. He has those too. Like he does that sort of orange green mix a lot of the time, and we definitely wanted to integrate that into that storybook kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And then you got The Fly, like very different
Right.
from everything. Our movie looks nothing like The Fly, but it feels the same in some ways.
Right.
And where it's like, same on the surface, campy, silly, gross, but has a lot of existential meaning behind it. And that was sort of a movie Anna kept coming back to. It's like, yeah, we have to be silly, but also this does mean something to her, to Hadley, to like everyone, portraying the anxiety taking over your life element of the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, I didn't think of The Fly at all, which is kind of crazy because there's so much similarity. Not again, I wouldn't even say maybe in tone. It's one of those things where watching Appendage, I was going, it made me actively nervous, like for the first third of the movie, because I was like, this movie's spinning a lot of plates tonally, and then like, and I've seen, and I mentioned Tales from the Crypt. The worst Tales from the Crypt episodes are where they do that, and then like all those plates start falling throughout the episode, and you're like, what on earth? Or they go like so far. Like I've seen a lot of movies that try to do that, something akin to the comedic tone of this film, but then it goes
Yeah.
too far where you lose any horror, or they try to do a comedy horror, but then it's like, well, there's like, we wasted time with comedy in the beginning to do all horror for the right, and
Yeah.
this movie, I feel like just visually, like jumping from the studio for the design studio to the look of, say, the bar, to the grimy, like where I saw Evil Dead the most was when she's got the creature locked up and there's that little streak of gold light and it's kind of banging against it. I was like, that's the door in Evil Dead that's like kind of
Yeah.
bumping up and down.
Yeah.
But it balances those tones really, really well. For you, were there any moments of panic going like, did I push this one piece too far? Like, should I have tried to just do consistent and safe for some of this? Like, because it's a crazy, just batshit movie. And I have to imagine there was some parts where you're like, is this going to cut together? Like these two kind of vibes?
I would have been more worried if Anna and I hadn't worked together so much and she wasn't so on it with the tone. I would say more than anything, she trusted me with a lot of the lighting choices and a lot of, we have a very strong, like almost hive mindy connection when it comes to like lens selection. And so wasn't worried about that, but she did keep bringing up tone. And so she was really on it and that kept me pretty honest about it. There were like, there's a couple shots where we took the color story really far. Like the bar, there's a moment in the montage before there's like the montage in the middle when she learns she can sedate the thing and like she's sewing a dress and we pushed her like red or orange tone to like straight up red. She's sewing into like it's a red frame in the middle of the film. It's like her sewing alone in her room. The windows are orange and it's glowing red. I'm like, this is the most surreal we've probably gone.
Right.
We reasoned it with, well, that would be the color of morning light coming in. So like, at least that's probably okay. But like her overhead light just goes straight red. And that was to be like, she's at the peak of losing her shit. And I think it completely works in context of the montage because the montage builds. It's like, you have a little leeway when you're dealing with sedating a little like smash Tootsie Roll looking monster fucker. Like it's, if you do anything a little silly, like people are already in the mindset that this is a little silly. So we tried to limit our going crazy moments to when the movie as a whole was going crazy. A lot of the scenes, like if I had tried to pull that red light and it was the opening scene and she's sewing, it would have been ridiculous. So, tracking how seriously, the movie is taking itself at the time and where Hannah's at and sort of what Anna wants out of each scene very much helped me keep things on track.
Right. Right.
Mostly. Maybe someone will disagree because, there's a couple choices in there, but
right. Well, you mentioned lens selection, which I wanted to talk about because there's a lot of like just really wide shots within the movie. So I really like the shots in the design studio, and then near the end, which felt very akin to like Evil Dead Rise or like movies like that, when her friend's coming and looking up at the building, and there's those super cool, almost fisheye shots. But in terms of lens selection, like, what were you going for in terms of, because there's I mean, pretty much everything is shot very wide, like even effects, like, and it's one thing I appreciated again about the movie is that the effects aren't hidden, like, and they do play into, like, you know, obviously, like, especially the first creature, like it's a puppet, like we're watching it and we're going like, this is kind of a fun, silly, creature, and the movie is like, here it is, like we're showing you, we're not hiding this or trying to make it look like something else, like this is it. You know, what was the process picking out the look and style as far as like lenses went for the movie?
Sure. We had, again, kind of like our guidelines for the color. We decided early on a few guidelines for, it's when you're dealing with a selection of lenses like 32, 40, 50, like they're very close, as you go, between the 40 and the 50, but like,
Right.
they do still have a different feeling. You still like the 50 feels dead neutral to your eye most of the time once it's on like the sensor that we had.
Mhm.
And that 40 adds just a little bit of extra curvature. And it's why I tend to like it a little bit more. I feel like it's a little bit more 3D, but you can misuse that lens easily. Like there are ways, or like, especially as you get wider and wider too, scenes where it's supposed to be her talking to a friend, you get too close on something too wide and it feels really fucking weird. And so
Right.
we knew that there was a limit and we needed to decide, because of the tone jumping around, we needed to make it really clear to people watching it, like how she felt about the people she was in each scene with. And so longer, like the 50 was typically what we used when she was talking to her friends. And then I'd be at a pretty comfortable over the shoulder medium distance. So there wasn't that much distortion and it was like kind of a pleasing, comfortable
Mhm.
image. And then when she was freaking out, a lot of her close-ups for the appendage stuff, it was a 40 mil, like way up in her face. And like the opening, that's like the main shot of her in that opening dining room scene with her family is when she's like looking like
Yeah.
raw, like, dead up eyed. Yeah, that was a 40, probably like maybe 9 inches away from her face. It was very
Wow.
close. And props to Hadley for putting up with me
Yeah.
getting that
She
close to her
probably
a lot
loved
of the
that.
time. It
Yeah.
was, it's tough because, yeah, you have to start acting to like tape marks on the matte box and things once you start obstructing the view of other actors. And she was a total pro about it. It was awesome. So we went in starting to design those rules, and also on a knowing, again, she wanted this to clearly be like a split horror comedy. We knew we couldn't get into too many like super long lens, like way super tight close-ups. There's two in the movie.
Like the eye
We used
shots and stuff.
the eye
Like that.
shots, and also there's one when she's washing her hands in this. It's actually one of my favorite shots. It's really simple, but she's washing her hands in the sink, and we tilt up and reveal her looking at herself in the mirror, and that's when her eye twitches the first time. And
Yeah.
that was like one of the only times I used like a 125 for a close up in the whole film. Otherwise, it was just for inserts. And it's one of the more dramatic feeling. I'd say that's more akin to like Meadowlands than anything else in the film. And I think Anna knew going in, because it was a comedy, she wanted to keep it more in like traditional comedic style frames, like on a lot of medium close-ups,
Mhm.
not a lot of tight close-ups. And so that
Yeah.
was where the lensing versus distance choices came into people, was maintaining that. Um, and even then, like the stuff with the appendage, we were kind of fighting okay, well, we know how to keep it from going too drama, too horror. Like we know what those rules are. How do you go too stupid? Like what's too silly?
Yeah.
And that was another thing where, like, if we went full, not 2013 Evil Dead, but like full original Evil Dead,
Yeah.
a lot of what they would have done was probably get on a wider lens and get up in the face of one of these pups. Like that was,
Right.
they were on like a 21 or something, up in Ash's business for a lot of that movie, and it was
Yeah.
so distorted and so silly.
Literally attacking him with a camera. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It felt so ridiculous. And so we were like, we can't do that either. And so a lot of the stuff with the appendage, we also stuck to our lensing rules, where it was like, okay, well, if this is an appendage scene, we'll probably on like the 40 mil, and we'll treat it like coverage on the appendage. We're not going to treat it like a specialty horror shot. We're going to treat it like it's a scene partner for her, and she's talking to this thing. And so that was how I think those scenes came about, where it was like, we need to make sure, even though you're aware it's a puppet, and people are not used to puppets a lot of the time, like a lot of people have probably gone CG monster for this in
Yeah.
other capacities. It's like, this got to feel like a character with her. And
Mhm.
so we always kept standard over the shoulder rules almost with it in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's huge. No, it is. It's one of those things like, and it's a bold swing of a movie anyway. Like, because there's some that like the minute they see that, but like they're either with it or not, like
Yeah.
there's people that are gonna go, this doesn't look hyper real. I was just talking to my wife about this the other day because we were watching we were watching I think it was Wizard of Oz we were watching. But I was just like, I miss this very, I sound like Harry Styles. It's a movie. It feels like a movie, but it's but I miss that theatrical feeling where it's like, it doesn't look real, but you're completely bought into this world, and you're completely
Yeah.
bought into these characters. And like with that movie, it's an extreme example. It's not even a fair comparison of what this movie style is, but just in terms of like, you don't need to buy into like, oh, this is really happening
Hmm.
in my world. It's like, is this really happening in these characters' world? And so I really liked it. And there were a couple of reviews that were like, oh, it's like a basket case by way of, and then it mentioned like a modern movie.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that very physical kind of creature. Um, as far as going into the effects, those tonally shift too, where you've got this creature that's like really kind of funny, gross, and then you go into this like, I mean, I don't even know how to explain it for someone who hasn't seen it, but you get this other version of it that's like extremely grotesque, looks more realistic. Like, working with the special effects people, like, how did you go about like showcasing their work to the best of your ability, but also like managing like, the way we shoot this is not how we're going to shoot this
Hmm.
next version of it or next iteration of it.
Sure. Yeah. I would say that we called them stage 1, 2, and 3, the
That's a
appendages,
good
just
way
to
to
keep
do it. There you go.
when we were shooting on say, 'cause we had to keep track of what day. I mean, we were shooting so out of order and like crazy setups. We
And
had
we
to give
can
them name.
And we can
Yeah.
hit spoilers. If you're listening to this and you're to this point, just go watch the movie, because I want to be able
Yeah.
to just talk about it. But and
Yeah.
I don't know how you'd listen to this without seeing it, because you'd sit there going, "What? What is this going to
Yeah.
do?" So, but
Stage
anyway,
3.
yeah,
Oh no.
stage three.
Yeah.
What does this become? Anyway,
Yeah. So yeah, the I would say the thing that really like the process that changed the most for us from the short to the feature, was actually that the little creature in the short had rods controlling its arms, and that meant we
Mm,
could do like a lot of lock off shots and things, and it kind of took the life out of, I think, some of the scenes with it, because the actors couldn't move around, we couldn't move around,
right.
and Anna and I struggled a bit with like, how do we make this thing feel alive when we have to like lock the camera, she can't move, and it's going to like wiggle its arms through
Yeah.
rods, and because the second you get into handheld with rods, you got to paint them out, and it becomes even more of a nightmare, and so. We on the feature changed how the stage 1 worked. The stage 1 on the feature lost its arms. So when you watch it now, you'll see like the biggest difference, besides its face looking a little more maggot-esque in the feature, is that
Right.
like it's got little nubs now. And that was
Huh.
primarily so that it could be strapped to her side and autonomous. And so she could run around and do whatever she wanted with this thing, and like yell at it. We could go handheld. I could whip between them if we wanted to, and there was
Yeah.
no issue of like VFX cleanup getting in the way.
Right.
Also, in the short, all its mouth could do was go up and down. In the feature, they got like a little vocoder box that you could speak into it, and it would like match whoever was talking.
Oh, okay.
And so she could really act with the thing in the scene. Like it was able to speak at her from off screen if we wanted it to, and it wasn't just like jabbing its jaw up and down.
Yeah.
So the first one, that was a very fun change for us, and it just gave us more freedom to work with it. I would say it kind of changed how the scene felt. It made it a little more visceral, and I would say it's still silly. Like it's when she lifts the
Yeah.
shirt up, it's like one of the best festival moments we have, when she lifts the shirt up and like people really have a great reaction to the first stage. Um, but it kind of gave us room to be like, this thing is really in the scene, and that's why it kind of had the effect I think it does, even to people who are
Hmm.
like, but it's a puppet, but it's still gross.
Yeah.
It feels pretty real, like you were kind of getting that earlier.
Yeah.
And so when we got to stage 2, that was a more in-depth process working with puppeteers, because this one, it needed 4 people to make it move. It had an
Right.
arm, like a big fat armature, a stick out of the back so that it could be like supported and walked. One for each arm, one for the legs, and then someone controlling the mouth. And so that got a little more complex. And that was again one of the things where a lot of the film is handheld. So Black Swan is a big influence for Anna on this.
Hmm.
But when we shot that puppet, that one had to be on a slider or on sticks, because whenever it moved, there were so many rods and so many things happening with it that like if it was handheld and they tried to paint that out of the background, it was going to be impossible. So
Yeah.
we locked, you know, the VFX artist and I, we worked to get the right height on it, so I could get like a good slider height off. Like we would put it on the ground. It was only 4 feet tall, and so like to get the right height for that thing was actually a very interesting challenge just in our tiny little apartments. Because a lot of people would stick a
Yeah.
crane or a dolly in there that could get the camera all the way to the ground.
Right.
We're in real Wilmington, North Carolina, like one bedrooms. These things are tiny. They're
Right.
not built for camera gear. So yeah, I was using simpler setups, you know, like slider and dolly to move with this thing. And so we'd have, you know, we'd rehearse the motion. It would walk towards us. We'd get like the speaking rhythm right, and then we'd go, you know, do a more full speed pass. And eventually, once we'd gotten enough passes where it felt pretty good, because there's issues where like, you know, if you're just dragging it on the ground, sometimes it starts to dip or like it waves or like it doesn't
Yeah.
look like it has any center of gravity to it. So that took a few passes. Then you pull it out of the shot, and we were able to, because I was on sticks, get a clean plate. And so in
Mhm.
post, they painted all the puppeteers out, all the rods out, everything, and
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
this little guy moving on its own. It was great.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it is. It's just it's funny, like it's silly, but then like um the shot where it's chained downstairs and eventually tricks her, and he's like, "Why do you keep me chained down here?" You know?
Yeah.
And by that point in the movie, you're like, "Oh, poor thing. Like, is this like you get tricked with her? You're like, oh, this cute little disgusting puppet thing. Why is she doing this to him?"
But it's
Um,
fun because I think the puppets sort of mature. You know what I mean? As the
yeah.
film goes on, and in terms of it matures the tone of the movie too. Like the
Yeah, in
first one is silly.
realism and seriousness and gravity, yes. And
But, you know, that stage 3 scene where she, like her crying out for her mom is like heartbreaking every time. It's really
yeah,
fucked up,
yeah,
and it's very interesting how Anna and Alex are able to gradient the tone of the movie from the first stage puppet to the second to that, and you're like, oh, this is the same film.
yeah,
How? I don't know, but like it is, and
yeah,
by the time you get there, you are no longer laughing. That is really genuinely sad, and
yeah. And it's freaky. Like that scene where
yeah,
she's in bed after going to her parents and she's crying, and then you just see that crawl up behind it. You're like, oh, I didn't know. For the stage in between those, so that would be
yeah,
stage 3 in the bed. So between stage 2 and 3, there's one of my favorite shots in the movie and favorite moments in the movie is when you realize that she's been duped. And all of a sudden, you know, I forget what the appendage says, but you know, finally or whatever. And then you see the shadow shot on the wall where it kind of like grows into
yeah.
the next form. Which I love stuff like that where you don't see it, you know, but you see it kind of thing. Um, was that a practical shadow, or was that something that was like a visual effects, like they drew it like a transformation? Like how did they go about doing that?
I will say it's yes and no
Yes.
practical shadow. It's so uh, Anna, Alex, and I had done the opening video for Slam Dance about 3 years ago, and 3 years ago, it doesn't matter. Anyway, it's one where basically this little girl grows into a giant bodybuilder with a little girl's head comped onto it. And so we'd done a version of that effect in the past where like we tried it on that one, and it was basically we took a plate of the garage, and yeah, they sort of just stuck they used a mat and just made a shadow on it, and
Yeah.
it didn't quite sell because the thing that's different between when you do post shadow on something and when you do real shadow on something, specular highlights disappears. Like everything that makes like a surface shiny, you know, like when you're looking at painted brick,
Yeah.
if you have a real light on it, you're going to see the shimmer of the paint. When a shadow crosses it, it becomes dull. When you do a post shadow on something shimmery, you just bring down the values, but like the shimmer is still there. And so it
Yeah.
doesn't really sell. And we learned that lesson on that last one. So what we did was we shot in the basement 2 plates of the wall, one where there was the light casting on it, and then one where we blocked the front light that was casting. So we had a shadow plate and a lit plate.
Mm.
And so in post, what happened was when we got back to LA, they'd been cutting the movie. Anna and Alex shot, I think it was Anna herself doing like this rising motion in the garage of like a straight flat plate as well. And then they used that as a mat for the shadow wall. And so they literally masked out the shadow and then stuck that over the lit wall. So it's as close to a real shadow as you can get because it was
Right.
technically it's obstructing the light in that case. And so it was a really weird mix of like 3 different elements had to come together. Because if you just took the shot of Anna doing the thing and just made it a black mask and stuck that on that lit wall, it would just look like a weird, dark, like it would look like almost image artifact. Or just like it wouldn't look really real. The trick was really getting an actual non-lit wall to come through, and that's how it meshed together so well.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. And something that only a cinematographer would think about is like the values of this light reflecting, don't look quite the same. And it is something that's funny because, there is so much in this film that's like feels old school in terms of how it's achieved. Like it feels, like you mentioned The Fly, what you're talking about. I've been watching through all the Universal horror movies for the last couple weeks, and rewatching some, watching some for the first time. And it's those same kind of in-camera tricks where it's like you can see they added a shadow, or like you can see these really creative ways that they did these effects without really being able to show you, this really cool transformation. There's a lot of use your imagination in those films, but they did it in these creative ways where it's like it is through a shadow, or it is through, The Invisible Man I just rewatched recently, and it's like there's so many things in that still to this day you're like, that's such creative storytelling beyond just the effects are still hold up in a lot of ways. But then beyond that, there's like these little things they do, these footprints here, or these little moments of smoke here that just blow your mind. But
I got to shout out. So we kind of talked earlier about my interest in VFX, and like I shoot a lot of green screen and a lot of VFX based stuff. This movie is a really good, I would say, mixture of the two, even if you don't realize it on the surface. Like there's a lot of VFX hiding behind a lot of the practical effects. And the shout out goes to I don't know if you watched the Corridor Digital, the VFX Artist React series. It's like they drop so much good knowledge that's practical for filmmakers in that the way they break stuff. They don't even just break stuff down. They explain all the elements that go into what they're doing on their end to get the VFX that sometimes you can't just tell by watching a VFX breakdown of something. And so I religiously watch those because those, I've learned so much about how to shoot VFX on set just from watching that stuff. And so, me on my own, I understand how like light works, but to consider giving two plates, like a lit and a non-lit one, that's something that, I think I have to give credit for. I just learned so much watching their stuff that, I would suggest if you're a DP or director about to embark on VFX, watch as many of those as you can, because you'll learn a lot.
Yeah, no, I love watching their stuff. I'm fascinated too, because sometimes there's a split between the I would say the DP world and say the VFX world, or the practical makeup world is for sure, and the visual effects world, to where the guys on set with the camera are like, I want to get it for real. I want to shoot this for real. Let's do this for real. And then there's like this clash between departments of like VFX is like, well, we don't even have what we need. And now we have to fix this because there wasn't the things that you mentioned thinking about, they're not being thought about. It's just like, here, fix this in post, like that's like the approach. So it's really cool to hear that you've got like a respect for both regions of work, I guess. Approaching I want to ask you this before I ask you the questions I ask everybody that comes on the show. But this is something that's just come up quite a bit as I've done this, and it's something that I've been trying to figure out is, you're a team of incredibly talented people. We haven't even talked about the music of the movie, which is, the score is so good. Like that was probably my favorite. That was one of my favorite elements of the movie was the music and the way that ratchets up. But you got a team of talented people. You've got talented VFX people working on this. You've got talented, creature makers, and, you've got a talented cinematographer and a director and all these different pieces, and each are talented in their own right. And so the question that's been coming up a lot as I talk to creators is, when it comes to working in a team environment, how do you balance letting your own talents and abilities shine while also being part of a collective unit? It's funny talking about that with a movie like Appendage, but working in sort of a symbiotic relationship, like how do you maintain like not cutting away people's talents while also not bolstering one person's talents more than everybody else? How do you balance those things?
As much as I think I would like to be able to take credit for all of that, I think a lot of it goes to a producer and a director
Mm,
choosing, like making smart choices when they hire the crew they do. I think it goes beyond artistic talent. I think it goes to who each person is. I think it takes balancing knowing who each person is and how they might interact with someone else when they're being hired for it. And so, we have the benefit of we've known each other for 10 years and we've all worked together for
yeah.
10 years. So that helps. And we now know each other's quirks. We all set each other up once or twice. It happens because when you've got a lot of passionate artistic people in a room together, passionate usually also means a little spicy, or it means a little like particular,
Yeah.
or perhaps neurotic, or very very tunnel visioned on your own work. It just happens,
You got a
especially when
little
you're in,
appendage in your ear saying they're gonna fuck up the movie, and you're
and when you
going,
when you're into time crunch, you're like,
yeah,
I got to do my job right now as best as I can. You kind of
right,
like, it's easy to shut things out and just hyper focus on getting your part of it
mm-hmm,
done.
right,
And so, good amount of credit goes to choosing the right crew before anything,
yeah,
and knowing how personalities will clash or not clash. But I think it really it does come down to just doing this over time. I mean,
yeah,
when you start, you don't realize just how you handle talking to other people might affect how they're able to do their job. You think I'm there to do my job and I want to show off, and like when you're young and you're like
yeah,
trying to just do cool stuff and like make stuff look cool, like you don't think about like, well, if I put a light there, the actor literally can't walk there anymore. Like
yeah,
it becomes, or like if I put diff there, like are they trapped in a little like 1 foot box of a frame they
sure,
can't move? And it's still easy to get carried away and like try and make something look exactly like you want it and forget that, the whole thing is a team effort down to like how you what you freedom you give the actors. and
right,
and I think one of the things that's really beneficial is knowing not only your director and how they're going to want the actors to be able to move, but you know to being able to talk with PD and learning specifically, like, I know I need this side of the room looking good. We have a lot of hero angles this way. Like, a lot of people might not bring that up. They're like, "Oh, that's interesting. We have a lot of shots looking this way," and they like laugh at it with the director. Never think about bringing it up with the PD. It's like, if you want to know, like, this is the hero angle for the opening scene. This is the second
right,
one. Like, these two today. Like, if you are so overwhelmed and you can't finish building out the set, like on day one, here's where I'm looking, and
right,
like take your time while we're shooting that to finish that stuff. And that's only doable when you also have a good relationship with your director and know like they're not going to throw a curveball and suddenly like, hey, let's flip
right,
and look over there now. And so you all have to be on the same page. But it's funny, it just comes down to just talk a lot.
yeah,
Like, just communicate about stuff you don't think anyone even gives a shit about. Communicate about
right,
things that like maybe you think someone might not be interested in, but like, I'm going to use this kind of light here because I think it'll be cool. And the PD's like, oh, that is cool. I should build something in that'll like refract that light. They wouldn't have done that if you hadn't brought up your dumb fucking
right,
light in the ceiling. But like, you might, if you don't
yeah,
do it, they'll never know. And then, I think if you're not working with a bunch of people who are very excited about what everyone is doing, it's going to not work out too well. Like,
yeah,
everyone should be their own nerd,
hmm,
and I think that's a vital part of the process.
yeah. No, I want to get your thoughts on it because that's something that just keeps coming up. Is like, because I've my career has been so much where I've been solo. It's been like videography and like we've done a couple things where there's like a little collaboration here and there, or like, recently we did something where it was like the most people that I had like all working on something. And it's a big jump because you're going like, oh, I picked them because they're so good at their thing. And then it's like that balance between like, I don't want to handcuff them by like putting them under my vision or under someone, but then also if everybody's doing their own thing, you know, I mean, we've watched enough zombie movies to know when everyone's out for their own survival, everyone dies, So,
Yeah,
but yeah, I love that answer. I know we have a few minutes left. I want to ask you some questions. I ask everybody that comes on the show. So
sure.
it's kind of slightly rapid fire, but we'll see how
Let's do
rapid
it.
it goes. But first and foremost, if you had to program a double feature with Appendage, what would you pick and why?
Oh, that's an awesome question that no one's asked me yet. So give me 1 sec. Let me think about this. Um, ooh, There's so many fun choices. You know, part of me wants to go with the obvious one and be like, an Appendage, The Fly double feature would actually be pretty fun. I'm like, what would be a funny one that would you wouldn't expect? You know, yeah, part of me like, would Face Off be interesting? Because like it's not exactly a clone situation, but it's a switching places situation. You
Right.
know, I'm like, huh, that would be totally also a very weird one. I hadn't thought about that weirdly. I don't know why, yeah, where that even came
Little
from.
Freaky
But
Friday in there, maybe.
oh yeah, yeah, exactly. I think what I would, if I don't know if I'm going to find the movie while we're on this call, but the idea I think would be to find one that is not necessarily a clone takeover, but a switching places, because the same loss of your life is very like, someone else taking over your life is still
Right.
rough, um, and interesting. In some ways, my partner's like, would Ex Machina be interesting? Because that's not necessarily about someone losing their own life, but it is about someone's, for lack of a better term, their own creation or monster sort of finding itself and taking over and becoming its own thing. Like
Yeah.
the ending of Ex Machina, the robot escapes into real life and becomes an invisible part of real life, and like no one would know it's a robot. And like I'm like, man, Hannah losing her life to this appendage and then it just taking over, and she, no one knows. Who's
Yeah.
gonna know? No one's gonna know. Like
Right.
that's totally very different movies also. But I'm like,
Yeah.
I think that's why I like weird double features. I like double features that are
Right.
adjacent, connected, and you have to put the pieces together why they're
Yeah.
connected.
Instead
So
of the same kind of movie exactly
yeah,
twice.
because like
Yeah.
the obvious answer is like Appendage in the Brood, Appendage in the Fly,
Yeah.
like Appendage in Basket Case, and like yes, there might be some value to actually. Okay, Appendage and Malignant would be a very entertaining double feature.
That would be a great double feature. Would
We
be
get I don't know why people have taken to slamming this movie in reviews, in the negative reviews. They're like, well,
right.
Malignant did it better, and it's like these are just very. That's like comparing like Hereditary and Evil Dead. Like, why? Why
I
are
could
you even
see
going to?
I could see if you heard the concept, like when it first appeared on your side, because I didn't know where the
Yeah,
movie was gonna go. I was like, oh, this is gonna be like it's gonna slowly make her start doing things. But that's not what
yeah,
the movie is. Like
no,
Malignant is not maybe like the first 10 minutes, but even tonally, it's so different. Like Malignant's going for that super gothic, over the top horror. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. That's just
and
two very different movies.
it's also on like a studio level, and I feel like people aren't
Yeah.
understanding that Appendage, while it was released on Hulu, was produced at an indie level. Like it was
Yeah.
produced as an indie, it was shot as an indie, and maybe we have a couple good tricks up our sleeve to make it look not that way between the
Yeah.
puppet and kind of how we did it. But there's a 30 something $1 million
You don't
gap
have a James
between
Wan budget. Yeah.
yeah, but and it's very interesting to see people like draw a connection. It's kind of flattering, honestly, to be like, oh, Appendage. My direct thought is Malignant. I'm like, damn, that means we did a pretty solid job against
Right.
it.
Can we put
Even if
that
you
on the
don't like them,
poster? Yeah.
yeah. Not
That's
as good as
awesome.
Malignant, but like
Yeah.
interesting. Like I appreciate that that's the connection that gets drawn. Sorry,
That's
back to your
awesome.
rapid fire question.
No worries. This always happens. So we'll
Yeah,
keep going. We're in this together.
yeah.
Um, which of your projects do you think is the best representation of you as a creator?
Um, mm, mm. You know, I've got one movie that I made that it's the smallest movie I ever made. It was a $7,000 iPhone road trip movie called Threshold, and it released on Arrow. And as far as it being a DP, let alone co-directing it, like as far as being a DP on that, it's kind of a nightmare scenario in a lot of ways. Like iPhone, no lights, road trip, 7 grand, no crew, nothing. Like it's just what it's going to be. And it was definitely a surrender yourself to the process kind of thing. Like it was all improv. We didn't have a script. We had an outline. And so
Hmm.
we shot it over 11 days, shot it chronologically, and the characters in the story, like we knew where it kind of needed to go, but like, between all the prep and backstory work we did with them and them finding the characters as we shot, it kind of came together in a wonderful way movies don't normally get to do. You never get to shoot chronologically. You don't get to every day reassess what the movie means and rewrite it as you go to like fit how the characters are treating each other. And
Right.
so that was just such a unique, interesting process. And like, on the surface, it's a weird one to bring up because it was so cheap. and it was such a small film in a lot of ways, but like it resonated with a lot of people because the characters would drive it, and it's the same kind of thing as Appendage, a mixed tone. It's mostly a brother sister drama with like horror sprinkled throughout.
Yeah.
And the ending's insane, and so it was enough horror that like Arrow was comfortable picking it up. But
getting forced out of your comfort zone is really fun sometimes, and that's kind of what Appendage did too. I do typically come from shooting more strictly serious, sad things, and so being forced to do, not forced, but being like very willingly did Appendage, but being made to not just shoot heavy, sad, dramatic, intense, and like have to think, what does my outlook on things mean when applied to comedy in some ways, was like a very interesting new thing. And so that's the, I guess, the long answer.
Speaking of new things, if you were given the green light to remake any film, what would you choose and why?
So they just did it. But Hellraiser, I had me and my producing and writing partner, we had a fun pitch for a Hellraiser movie, and it was very different. It was sort of based, I think when you do something like Hellraiser now, and I understand the inclination to need to like sort of explain sort of the mythology to people who haven't watched it before, because a lot of people tuning in haven't seen the movie. The new one, to me, in some ways, I love that directing DP team. I think they're fucking phenomenal, and like I've learned so much from them. But like, I think there was sort of a approaching it as if no one had seen a Hellraiser movie before. View to it, where like it was the characters introduced, like we'd never seen the Hell Priest, we'd never seen the bot. Right. Well, look at this thing that we don't know, and I'd be like, I think that kind of fought some of the success of the movie. It's like, why hide any of it at this point? Like, we are in this world. There have been like 8 of these.
It's like Spider-Man. We don't need to see Uncle Ben die,
And so to me, I wanted to do a version where like that was all out there already. This was like adding to the mythology in a new way. That was kind of what I was hoping to, that was what we'd wanted to do. Obviously, with there being a reboot now, probably won't be another one for a while. But
right. I don't know. It is Hellraiser. They crank those out. So
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Let's see. What do you think is the best decade of film history?
That is tough. So there's the stretch of like one of my favorite movies of all time is Seven. I love Seven. And then I think if you had 10 years, Shame is another. I think Shame was like early 2000s.
The right? Fassbender?
Yeah, that was 2013. Like
mid-range.
95 to 2005 as some of my favorite, because that was still when mid-range dramas and thrillers were happening. It was when you were allowed to make still like that weird $20 million or $30 million like crime thing or so I like that era for that. Shame, it hits me every time. I've taken so much of my cinematography language from how that movie's shot. Again, why Appendage was a fun one to try and break my brain on, because I'm usually a little sadder than that. But I'm a huge like horror, like I love 80s horror, like early to late, like maybe tail end of the 70s through like late 80s horror. I think is 77 to 87 maybe, or like 74 to 84.
Yeah,
great period of time. So those I would have to battle between those 2 decades, which would be my favorite.
Yeah, love that. I'll skip here to my last question. What do you think is the best piece of advice that an aspiring filmmaker should hear?
You know what? I got a good answer for this because I just had to write it somewhere else, and I've never had good advice, but I just put it into words.
Perfect.
You're never going to shoot the same thing twice. Like you'll step onto a lot of sets and you'll shoot similar things, but you're never going to shoot the scene you're shooting now, unless it's like a Marvel movie and you're doing a reshoot because they added something to the story. Like you're never going to shoot literally the same scene again. And so I guess even in that case, you're still not doing it. There will never be the same crew surrounding it, the same emotional intent going in. Everyone's not invested in the same way. The actual content of the scene you're never going to do again. And so it's really easy to get caught up on a feature, especially a low budget feature, and be so stressed you lose track of what you're actually getting to do, and you're so worried about so many elements, and it's your first one for like a streamer or a studio, and you're like, oh god, I got to be so impressive, I can't just like take the time, do what I do best on a scene, and also enjoy it. And like, it's easier when you're doing something like Appendage with ridiculous puppetry in it, because like it is constantly sobering and constantly a reminder of like the room you're in when you like you're holding a camera, you're lighting on the shit, and you look and there's this little fucking thing on the floor, and it is talking in a weird voice, and it is gross, and it's covered in slime, and you're like, oh right, this is where I am in time right now. This is like the moment I'm in, and it'll kind of calm you down and bring you back to like, maybe it sucks, maybe this like it's maybe the day is like your worst day on set ever, it's the hardest day you've ever had, but like look at what your job is like today. This is your job, this is awesome. Like you have to bring yourself back around to those moments, and otherwise it's so easy to get caught up in all the stress of it all.
Right. Love that answer and love this interview, Powell. Thank you so much for joining me on today's show. And for anybody who wants to follow you and see what you're working on next, what's the best way for them to do that?
Check out website and Instagram. So powellsrobinson.com, and my Instagram is just my name, Powell_Robinson. Usually pretty up to date on both of those things. So
awesome. I'm going to go follow you right now, and hope we talk again in the near future.
Definitely. Thank you so much.